Hi, everyone. In my book, Gateway Between Worlds, Saints and Heretics, I talk about the Balkans and I talk about that region especially and what happened there. In my findings, I discovered that Balkan people are actually more or less genetically the identical people. Serbians, Croatians, Bosnians, they are genetically speaking identical, right? But what is the divider then? Well, the divider is the great divider that divides humanity, which is religion. And in that area, we have three major groups vying for power. And those are the Serbian Orthodox from the failed Byzantine Empire, which is no longer around. We have the Croatian Catholics, who their master leader is the Pope in Rome, which is still around. And I should clarify that Russia is today considered the guarantor of Orthodox, if you will, but you know, that's a whole other topic on how effective they are at defending the Orthodox. Anyway, and then the third group are the Bosnian Muslims, which back in the day was based in the Ottoman Empire, was based in Istanbul. Um, Today, Tehran would be the capital of the Islamic Empire, if you will. So anyway, these three groups, the Serbs, the Croatians, and the Bosnians, are all vying for, and the Albanians, if you want to count them as well, um, who moved into Kosovo. This is why the Balkans was such a fraught region. On top of that, we had imperialist groups like especially the Italians and the Germans, and of course the French and the British and the Americans meddle extensively in that region as well, very, very extensively. So this region has been literally pulled apart, has been dissected like a laboratory frog. That's one of the lines that I use time and time again, especially during World War II. No other region in the world was more dissected than the Balkans in World War II. This is the extent that this region has been traumatized, has been abused by imperial powers to such an extent that it is mind-boggling. And I discuss how the world's most sadistic regime got into power, and that regime has been pretty well erased from history. That regime is called the Croatian Ustaše. And then we can pretty much see them as modern day crusaders. We can pretty much see them as the Vatican's private army in the Balkans um, for the Croatians. So the Franciscan priests made up a huge, worthy driving force of the Ustaše. And again, they were like crusaders. That's why this genocide was carried out by Catholic priests wearing Catholic robes. That's why forced conversion was a aspect of the genocide. But what ended up happening in reality is the priests were overwhelmed by their lust for murdering, that even recent converts, even the few Serbs that involuntarily had a knife to their throat who converted to Catholicism, oftentimes they were still killed anyway, because as one Ustache said, even though their their soul had been saved, their body is still corrupted. Some insanely absurd belief like that. Because these people were driven by Catholic dogma, they were driven by medieval beliefs, which is why they tortured and mutilated people in the medieval fashion, like using extreme sadism. And this happened to over 500,000 people in the Balkans. This happened to the Serbian Orthodox. Primarily, first and foremost, they were the main victim group. Um, a lot of numbers say over 500,000 Serbian Orthodox alone were murdered in this fashion. They were thrown alive into karsts. They were skinned alive. They were chopped up into pieces like wood. They were impaled. burnt alive, mutilation. This is how the Serbian Orthodox were killed because, according to the Vatican, they were not the right Christians. They were schismatic. They were schismatic, and this goes back to the Great Schism of 1054, which is when the church split into two. We obviously know there were five original churches of Christianity, but three of them were no more, and then that left two by 1054, and those were the churches of Rome and Constantinople. And Rome wanted supreme leadership of the church. They wanted Constantinople to be submissive to Rome, and Constantinople refused, and that created the schism, the break within the church, which created the Byzantine Empire of the East and the Roman Catholic Empire of the West. So the Roman Catholic Empire made Europe, and Serbia has never been part of this Europe because they've always been Orthodox. And according to the Catholic Church, they have always been schismatic. And according to their own dogma, schismatics are on par with heretics. Schismatics should be treated like heretics. They are to be destroyed, and their memory is to be destroyed so that their ashes are not venerated by relatives. This is why this is part of Catholic dogma that even their memory is to be destroyed. This is the type of eraser that exists in Catholic dogma, and this is what happened. And if you read what the Ustache were saying, they said we must even destroy their memory, not even just their bodies, but we must destroy all evidence of their existence in Croatia on the Krajina. So this is what my book talks about. It goes into the into the details. It talks about the Krajina, the military frontier, which was a apparatus of the Austrian Habsburg Empire, which is when many Serbs in the Great Migration of Serbs moved from the Ottoman Empire to the Krajina, which is now called Croatia. And the Habsburgs were willing to take on the schismatic Serbs because they needed reinforcements. And at the time, they were willing to overlook schismatic nature because they needed more soldiers. So that brought in a huge influx of Serbs onto Croatian territory, and over the years, we kept seeing how Croatian nationalists referred to Serbs as a tumor in a body. These are very similar ideology to how we hear the Khmer Rouge talking about the Vietnamese, as if they are a tumor within the body that has to be removed. And this is exactly how nationalist Croats, especially the Ustaše, talked about Serbs, as though they were a foreign element, as though they were an immigrant that had to be expunged. And not just their body, but again, their memory. So this is exactly why the genocide took place. Um, it's exactly why I also talk about the medieval kingdom of Croatia and how that was a guiding force for the Croatian Ustaše, how they believed in resurrecting King Tomislav's medieval Croatian kingdom, and how the borders of that medieval kingdom was the driving force of the borders for the fascist Croatian state of World War II, and how they were really trying to resurrect a Croatian kingdom in World War II. That was really what the independent state of Croatia was. So, this is what happens when people turn to the distant past as inspiration instead of the future. And this is what happens when religious extremism gets taken to the zenith degree. And we can see that it resulted in the most sadistic regime and genocide in modern history, which was again the Croatian Ustašes mass murder of genocide rather of over 500,000 Serbian Orthodox. Other victims include the Roma and the Jews as well, and enemies of the Croatian Ustaše, which were communists. So we can just see what happened, and I talk about lots more, but those are my main talking points. So go today and pick up a copy of Gateway Between Worlds, Saints and Heretics by yours truly.